Some years ago, I was in the manipulation industry. That was to say, I used to work for a public relations agency, which more accurately ought to be called a propaganda agency, since that's basically what they do. I worked on campaigns to manipulate how people thought, usually about trivial things, but not always. And I can tell you one thing that never came up in the many meetings I attended was whether or not the thing that we were promoting was true or good. No. These kind of philosophical things don't enter into the picture in PR. All that enters into the picture is what are we being paid to sell and how are we going to sell it? By manipulating minds. And it turns out there is a method to this manipulation. And perhaps no one has done more to catalog these techniques than Robert Cialdini in his 1984 book, Influence, The Psychology of Persuasion. Cialdini went undercover. He trained at used car dealerships, fundraising organizations, and telemarketing firms to observe real-life situations of persuasion. And he found that influence is based on a handful of key principles, like reciprocity, commitment, consistency, social proof, authority, liking, scarcity, unity, and many more. Now, these techniques have since been adopted by self-help gurus, YouTube hucksters, pickup artists, political action committees, corporate PR, and mass media. Almost anyone and everyone who wants to manipulate the minds of others. To manipulate your mind. Now, of course, nobody wants to be manipulated, so learning to recognize these methods can form a first line of defense. If you don't wish to be manipulated, it's first required that you recognize what it looks like. Now, although these methods and principles apply broadly, I'm going to use COVID as an example just because it's current. And one of the first strategies Cialdini identified was the yes set. Get people to say yes to something small at first. And in this way, they're much more likely to keep saying yes. This is a classic for down at the car dealership. The salesman will ask you, do you like a car with plenty of horsepower? Oh, yeah. Do you like a car with comfortable seats? Oh, yes. Well, here's a car with comfortable seats and plenty of horsepower, so you should buy now. Well, the logical answer is to keep saying yes, to use this momentum. So in the case of COVID, we had 2 weeks to flatten the curve. Oh, come on, you can do 2 weeks, right? Yes. Well, that gradually turned into a month worth of lockdown. And then Christmas was canceled. And then socially, economically coerced into taking a vaccine. I mean, there would have been riots if people said you were going to have forced vaccinations and vaccine passports and lockdowns through Christmas. But after the habitual yesing, it almost seems like the new normal. And there's another tell sign of a PR agency at work. The creation and widespread use of slogans like new normal. When you see every organization around the world practically using the same term, that's a tip-off that this is being coordinated. Now, related to the yes set is the idea of fractionation. You get people to do something not once, but again and again, and increase the level of intensity each time. 15 days to flatten the curve, to the month lockdown, to the year-long lockdown, and once the precedent is set, there's no end to it. Repetition is compliance, and to break this pattern would require people to admit error in previous compliance. And people hate to admit that they're wrong. And so the madness continues. Control is permanent. Another factor and technique is confusion. Keep people in a state of uncertainty. For example, these lockdown rules change on practically a day-to-day basis. Wear a mask, don't wear masks. Wear 2 masks. The vaccine will save us. The vaccine doesn't prevent the spread. It's from bats. It's from a lab. It's from China. New York is the epicenter. Trust the experts, but not those experts. Are you feeling confused yet? Good. That makes you easier to control for people who want you controlled. Repetition is another technique, and this one barely requires any illustration, since turn on the TV and you'll see the same things repeated over and over and over again. And this leads to another form of compliance. It's been said so many times, how could it be wrong? I mean, Joseph Goebbels nailed this. You tell the big lie and you repeat it, and people accept that it's true. A little more advanced technique is providing the illusion of choice. Make people believe that they're in control by giving them choices, which in any event lead to the same result. For example, do you want a Pfizer vaccine or the Moderna vaccine? But perhaps the most common used persuasion technique is the idea of social proof. Now, this is the idea that everyone else is doing it, especially the cool people, so why not you? In the modern day, for better or worse, that means trotting out the Hollywood celebrities. But is there any reason you should give a crap about medical advice from Elton John, Christy Brinkley, Samuel Jackson, Brad Pitt, or any of these people? No, there isn't. They don't know anything. They're just familiar faces that you've come to like, and so you're more susceptible to accepting what they say. They're just reading the lines provided to them by others. But social proof isn't limited just to celebrities. Oh, no, no, no. All over in Facebook and Twitter, you'll find people either seeking or selling social acceptance. For example, take a look at this Facebook promo. I wear a mask because it protects the community I love and serve. Why do you wear a mask? Well, why? Here, I think the commentator summed it up. I wear a mask so that I can demonstrate my virtue signaling superiority and feel like I'm doing exactly what I was told to by authority figures. I hate thinking for myself, and I know that obeying and not thinking differently than the flock is the best, because whatever a politician or government bureaucrat tells me to do is always true and always in my best interests. Yes, this is how to be a dummy. That is not listening to the science. That is just simple peer pressure. It's the tactics of the third grade being enacted on society writ large. Now, the flip side to social proofing is outcasting, which is the creation of socially unacceptable outgroups. In the case of COVID, that would likely be anti-vaxxers. And in other cases, they might call them science deniers or conspiracy theorists or white supremacists or what have you. Just the idea of creating some kind of villain class, somebody that you don't want to be if you want to be socially accepted. Now, the funny thing is, if you actually look into what some of these outcast groups say, they are very seldom what is claimed by those doing the outcasting. And that's the point. You are not meant to look into what they're saying, because you are being threatened with banishment and disapproval for doing so. It doesn't matter if the outcasts have anything legitimate to say. What matters is ending any discussion before it begins, to control the information that you receive, and therefore to control you. Scarcity is another method, and you'll see this in headlines all over the place for the vaccine availability, or who should get it first, this group or that group, and there's long lines, and you might have to wait, and yada, yada, yada. Classic sales technique of perceived limited supply in order to create demand. It's the same method when you're online looking for a hotel and it says, only one room left available. Oh no, better book it now. Maybe you don't even want to stay there. The idea is to stop thinking and take action. Action that someone else wants you to take. And there's so many more. Cialdini is full of classic psychological control techniques, as well as people have followed up with them. If you've ever looked into neuro-linguistic programming, it's quite fascinating how people can be influenced by the use of words. And learning a little bit more about this can be very helpful in at least recognizing when these techniques are being used. Now, that's not to say that the use of these psychological influence has to be nefarious or even incorrect. It's entirely possible that people wielding this influence do so for good and beneficial reasons. But one must also accept that it's also possible to be the opposite. Influence can be wielded for good or for bad, and much more likely good for some and bad for others. And that is most likely the case with COVID. The fact that so many of these manipulative techniques are all in use and in so wide a scale is a warning sign. The fact that legitimate discussion and disagreement is so overwhelmingly suppressed is confirmation that a story is not being told, but sold. Are you buying it? Well, many have. Maybe most. And that's what Cialdini called the unity principle. The more that people identify themselves with others, the more that they're influenced by those others. It's really a surrender of oneself. And I would suggest that's not a place you should want to go. It's a herd mentality. And maybe, just maybe, it might be worthwhile to pause and to ask, just what exactly is in it for the shepherds? For although they appear to care for the flock, in the end, the sheep are either sheared or dinner. And it's my contention that the shepherds of this supposed crisis want total control of society, of your body, your behavior, your likelihood of whether people live or die. Of course they must, because far from being a conspiracy theory, they already have it, don't they? If you let them. And I would suggest, don't let them. Now, of course, I'm trying to influence you too, right now. But I'm not concealing anything, not even my motives, which is to have a more free, more fair, more prosperous society for everyone, where people are able to make their own decisions based on the best available information and to be responsible for the consequences of those decisions. And for this radical notion, I'm an outcast, an extremist. But as a wise man once put it, extremism in the pursuit of liberty is no vice. Peace out.